Just want to, Professor Walker, I just want to first off commemorate and praise everyone involved with the Common Reading Project here at OCTC. As you may or may not know, March is Common Reading Month. The City of Owensboro has recognized that. The City of Owensboro is a city on the move. We're an all-American city, and one of the things we take pride in is valuing diversity, diversity of perspective, diversity of life, diversity of opportunity. And we are honored to have you with us. We have so many great authors here this week. And so in recognition of your coming to join us, and as Poet Laureate of Kentucky, we want to extend to you, sir, the key to the city. You have free reign. That does not get you off if you're speeding down the highway, unfortunately, but you can try. I'm sure you're very persuasive. You can try. Here's the box to keep it in. And we are just absolutely honored to have you with us. And again, thank you. I'm sure you're going to share some great insights as you do with your work. So I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. If it did work on speeding tickets, I could have used it an hour ago. Okay, it looks like there's people are stuck in here. And thank you for, I'm assuming at some point you're going to get it wet today. Just accept it. It's going to get rained on, or you've already gotten rained on. That's the nature of the weather. I guess that, maybe we can believe that winter is over, but maybe we can't. I'm afraid to accept that idea that there won't be another snow. I think in Lexington we're expecting one more snow next week, and it just seems cruel to me. but we're surviving. I'm gonna ramble a little bit. I was here forever ago as part of the Common Reading experience, and it's something I've been part of in I guess in several formations. I did one in my hometown that was school-wide and for the public school system and the local Center College. I did one for the state of West Virginia that was a lot bigger and broader. It didn't really involve me, but the one I was involved in here was probably the most enjoyable because there was so much preparation done in advance. And it really makes a difference to have people in the audience who are familiar with the work and who aren't trying to figure out or wish they could look up something you just referenced. Or if you say things like, are there any requests? And 20 hands shoot up and they're poems that they want to hear out loud. That really makes it rewarding as a presenter to have that kind of feedback and relationship with an audience. So it was easy to make the decision to come back here again and to be part of this. And I regret I won't be around the whole week, but I get to drive back and not get a speeding ticket. Another one, and fly to the Virginia Festival of the Book, where I have another presentation in the morning. And I think these are the kind of challenges in scheduling that Jill Savant will be familiar with. That when they honor you as a Poet Laureate, what they really don't tell you is that your time is no longer your own. That there will be a triple demand on requests from reading groups and libraries and middle, elementary, and high schools and colleges and conferences and programs, and people don't want to hear you say no. So the hard part for me, I was telling the reporter earlier, the student reporter, that the only thing that has not been pleasurable about being Poet Laureate is having to learn to say no. And it's not that I wanted to say no. My wife told me that I didn't have any more time to give away. That I had other obligations. So I'm learning how to postpone things, to push people out. February was especially grueling during African American History Month. A lot of people only want African American programming during February, and so I've enjoyed the opportunity to convince people that there's 11 other months, and 11 times the opportunity to have a program that involves an African American reader or poet. So that's been good for some programs, and it kind of spreads out the demand too. But one of the things that I'm looking forward to, although my nephews and nieces aren't because they don't get any, is summer. They have so many snow days that they're in school. It feels like they think the rest of the summer. So I'm going to read to you today. I'm going to try to begin with where I left here, reading from Buffalo Dance, those many years ago, and then read from a sequel that came after Buffalo Dance, called When Winter Comes. And these are two books about history, but they're still collections of poetry that try to tell the story in a way that makes it rounded, that I think is closer to the truth, even though it doesn't qualify as traditional history. But there was research involved. It does tell the story, but it tells the story in a way that most readers have not heard it. And after that, I hope to read, there's time to read from Isaac Murphy, another book that deals with history and Kentucky specifically. And I chose these three because one of the things I get to talk about a lot is how important it is to do what is being done here this week, is celebrate Kentucky and celebrate Kentucky writing and celebrate the rich literary tradition in the state. It is something we can be proud of, and I think that one of the things that I deal with working with young students is trying to work against that notion of high school seniors thinking that when they graduate from high school, that their number one goal is to get out of Kentucky. It's almost as if they have to escape somehow because this place is something that they don't want to be a part of. And a lot of young people feel like that, but I think the thing that kind of drives that attitude about the state is the lack of familiarity with all the richness that exists here. And one of those things is the literary tradition, that you're going to be part of the whole week, you'll get a sense of that. In this very room, and I look out to the mid row and see these award-winning writers that have joined us today in the audience, that these are names that students should know. There are very few schools in the state that actually teach Kentucky writers at the high school level. And I think that's criminal personally, that they do learn poetry, they learn nonfiction, and they read fiction, but most of those authors are not Kentucky writers. At the same time, James Steele and Gertie Norman and Crystal Wilkinson and Barbara Kingsolver, Wendell Berry, these are names that other high school students in other states know a lot about because it's in their curriculum. And somehow we've got to figure out how to balance that, to recognize how important it is. And maybe it starts at this level. It starts in a space where you get to teach future teachers, and those teachers remember these authors and they own the books. And when they're in charge of their own classrooms and curriculum and syllabi, that they find a way to put them in the classroom and in front of their students. And I think that may be reaching or asking for a whole lot, but I think that is as political as my Poet Laureate duties get, is to make that argument. And I think that we can pull that off. But having said all that, and probably too much, let me read a poem or two. The first one I read is the opening poem from Buffalo Dance. And if you're not familiar with the story of York, I'm pretty certain you've heard of Lewis and Clark. And the thing about Lewis and Clark has more to do with what you don't know, and it's not your fault. It's just the way the history and the story's been told is that the Lewis and Clark expedition was made to look in almost every book about the expedition to really be the exploits of two white male superheroes. And you almost never hear that there were 42 people on the expedition. You almost never hear that had it not been for Sacagawea or Sacagawea, depending on where you're from, a 15-year-old Native American young woman who had a 3-month-old baby along with her on the expedition, all these men would have starved to death. They would never have completed the expedition. I mean, you almost never hear that story. You don't hear that had it not been for York, the manservant who belonged to William Clark, that there were times when the Native Americans who met them had made a decision as soon as they saw them to kill everybody in the party until they saw York. And their response to York was such that they gave them a second chance, and so they wanted to know more about York. But you don't hear those stories, and it's those kinds of stories that drove me to want to recast or challenge that version of the truth in the voice and on the tongue of York from his persona, from his point of view, and put you in that space in the same way that you might experience a movie. So I'm going to read a poem called Wind Talker, which imagines York is at the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, for the first time, and He's never seen the ocean. And they've been traveling for a year and a half, and he's totally blown away by everything he's experienced. You know, the Rocky Mountains, you know, seeing 100,000 plus buffalo at a time, all these different Native American tribes, you know, being treated like a human being and not like a slave. Waterfalls that trump Niagara Falls. Imagine seeing not one, two, three, but four of those along the way. And then finally reaching the ocean, and maybe the biggest fish you've ever seen was a catfish, and seeing a whale for the first time. You know, imagine how that might feel, and to understand that, you know, when you see that, you want to know that when you get back home, you're going to want to talk about that. But you are one of the few people in the group who's illiterate. You not only don't have an iPhone, or you can't Instagram what's happening, you can't even write it down. I mean, you can't even draw because, you know, those aren't skills that you've developed yet. But you watch other people do that every single night. You know, imagine the power of having to look at something and know that you have to remember it as clearly as possible. And it's going to be another year and a half before you can talk about it, have to call it back up again. So this is where York finds himself. At the same time, also thinking about his wife, and he's missing, in this moment, he's missing his wife, and he's looking back at this year and a half he's just experienced. This opening poem is called Wind Talker, in the voice of York. If I can make my words dress they naked selves in blackberry juice, laid down on a piece of bark, sheep, or onion skin like massa do, if I could send a letter home to my wife, floated in the wind on wings or water, I'd tell her about Katonka and all the wide and high places this side of the big river. How his family, numbering 3 for every star in the sky, looked like a forest when they grazed together, turned into the muddy Missouri when they thunder along faster than any horse, making the grass lay down long after the quiet has returned. How they don't so much as raise a tail when I come round with my woolly head and tobacco skin, like I'm one of them, making the Arikara and Mandan think me, Dick Medicine, Katonka who walk like man. Today, we stood on the edge of all this, looked out at so much water the mountains we crossed to get here seem a little smaller. As I watch fish the size of cabins dance in the air and splash back in the water like children playing, I think about her, and if we don't ever be free, then I close my eyes and pray that I don't live